Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Motherland, Fort Salem. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously we get introduced to, the matriarch, who basically is the reason why the bloodlines are what they are. She basically plays matchmaker as kind of her role, and she even basically for Abigail, she's like, oh yeah, the reason why your bloodline is so powerful the way it is because I kind of help, make, like they've kind of played that role for so long, and it's just kind of like, that's it to me. It takes a little out of the the romance of the angle of because for Abigail, and I think that's such a interesting development to Abigail's story is for so long she just wanted to prove herself as a bellwether. She took pride in being a bellwether. She still does, but now it's like that's all she's seen as, like a bellwether. It's like I don't want to be just Abigail Bellwether. I just want to be seen as Abigail, And I think that's such an interesting shift to her character, but especially because when the matriarch is like, oh no, we're just gonna I'm gonna find you someone to hook up with. It's like, it's Grigori. I'm sure the whole thing with Liba probably plays an angle in that, just because what was happening between them. But for her, it's also the thing of she's with Adil, and she's not able to kind of decide who she wants to be with. It's kind of the downside to this whole situation. I guess she never really thought about it too much. I guess because for her, she was always about, yeah, I'm willing to do what's right. It's part of the army. We have our role to play, but it's she found someone special, in a deal. She feels there was something meant to be, but now it's it feels like her life isn't her own anymore. It's in control. For so long, it was kind of under her mom's control, and now her and her mom are better, but it just seems like every other angle is just being a bellwether, I'm living someone else's legacy. I'm not able to forge my own. I can't forge my own path. I have to live the path that was forged out to me by my ancestor, Jen Bellwether, So, and each, Raelle and Tally are coming up with their own issues. I mean, for Tally, that's, she's dealing with the fact that she's dealing with all these memories from Sarah, but at the same time, it also her blood. Obviously, this circumstance for the Craven family is something new as well for them. So it's kind of she has to kind of quickly get adjusted to the way things kind of operate in this case. And then Raelle's got to deal with the fact of not only her new powers, but also she has to because she's always looked at in a certain way because her mom hooked up with a civvy, and it's now that kind of taints their bloodline, and that makes it kind of icky as well, because it's nah, it's about pure bloodlines, because the conversation came up later on. It's no, there's witches out there who probably don't even know. It's yeah, but that bloodline's so diluted now that it's not pure anymore. And it's I guess it makes sense, because it's from a witch perspective, the more diluted a bloodline is, the less powerful it is. But at the same time, it is also kind of other people in history have kind of had that mentality about purity. So you're I don't know. It's not a good side of life you really want to be about. Not just in history. There's still people nowadays that are kind of all about the purity and everything like that. So, but you're not in, because even Raelle's I'm not interested in, this whole matchmaking thing, and I'm also not interested in dudes. Because I was curious. I was I didn't know where Raelle, felt on that, lane of things. So I didn't know, she, was bi, or whether she just straight up was no, I'm only into ladies. So I'm it seems like this solidified she's only into ladies. Well, I think she kind of made that clear last season too. I forgot when she buddied up with the dude. It's yeah, he's yeah, you're only interested in girls. He's I'm only interested in dudes, so don't even worry about it. We're just good friends, So I guess I didn't really think about that, but it is still going to be a situation that's kind of forced. But regardless of what your circumstances are, you're going to hook up with someone because you're going to continue your bloodline. You need to, or because there are less witches being born every day, and the ones that are still out there that we haven't found yet, which that's a whole thing we'll get to in a second, there's such a diluted bloodline. We need pure witches, which is kind of spit in the face, because even for Sarah, it was don't discount it. All witches matter, all witches count, Which even she, her and the matriarch go at it, because it's you wouldn't have to worry about it if you and your people hadn't lost, lost all the other witch bloodlines, but it's also Sarah, I don't take orders from you, so how about you bounce out of my room? Which is so interesting, because we're so used to Sarah being the top dog, because she's on kind of even footing with it's so interesting, considering she's kind of the backbone of so much of this, but she's not the hierarchy in it, because she's still on even ground with the rest of the Hague, So she kind of has to like submit to like their general thoughts. It's like they kind of outvote her. She's kind of on the outs. But then, like, to know that there's another group that exists that kind of, I mean, technically the president has power over her, but then technically she has power over the president, because it's like, right, we need to put out this thing to get all young women tested. And it's like, no, the vice president's against it, because it's like, yeah, my daughter, she's forced to fight. How is she safe? It's like, it's better than her not knowing what she is, because at least this way she's trained and prepared to defend herself as well as her country. But also it's like, right, it's part of the Salem Accords. Every witch has to join the army. Your daughter is no exception. But the president was making promises, but Sarah does her thing, and Petra immediately picks up on like, oh, this is what you're doing. And it's like, that is kind of the crazy thing of like, right, second time you've manipulated the president like that. One, you did it live on air. I mean, granted, no one knew what you were up to, but Petra later on is like, yeah, you are pretty good at getting your way, huh? Because The Hague is working, everyone's working together, you know, on trying to figure out how to deal with the Camarilla and stuff like that. And so Sarah knows that Petra knows about what she did. It's like, I mean, she knew what you did last season, and now she knows what you did this situation. But I guess it's like, it's for the greater good. Like, I mean, it's still kind of dangerous. Like, right, people don't agree with you. You use your powers to manipulate them. But I think Petra, from the perspective of like, right, I had a whole bunch of family murdered, so if I can find like maybe other members of the Bellwether family, if there's still any out there, because that's what makes Abigail's situation that much more too. Once again, like Abigail, Tally, and Rael are like the end of their bloodline, so they have to keep it going. You know, it's kind of on them. And so, you know, once again, it's just kind of like that whole like, I mean, it is what it is, I guess, but it's just kind of like, once again, it just kind of takes a little of the romance and like, finding a person you want to be with and having a family and everything kind of takes a little bit of that out of it, especially because like, in Abigail's case, it's like, oh, I'm more than my womb, because she was like, no, I'm more than just my traits. It's like, you know, you know, that's fine and dandy. Like, you're, you know, being being who you are and everything is great. But those traits, I made sure that those pass down throughout your family. So that's what that comes down to. It's like, once again, it's like, oh, I'm just nothing more than my womb, you know? I want to be more than that. She wants to be more than just, she doesn't want to just be another member in the Bellwether family. She wants to form her own legacy. And with the Rael, the whole thing with the mycelium, trying to control more and more of it, but like, you know, calling it an it, but then Isadora is like, no, her, like, yes, she has fungal aspects to her, but we still know nothing about the mycelium. They're just that it's ancient. And so thinking about, like, I guess, like, when it reached out to Rael, because she was asking questions, and it reached out to her, and it reminded her of that memory she had with Scylla, I guess, like, that kind of, like, I guess that was the whole point of, like, oh, you want that particular seed, okay. And she does it, and then the mycelium responds, and then proceeds to literally jump down her throat, and she's like, and Isadora came back and basically captured the song that was playing, and later on it's like, right, basically it's registered like 1,000 different voices all at once, and it's like, how is that possible? All I have is my voice. And then, you know, Sarah's like, Rael, can you do it again? And Rael's like, okay, because basically this mycelium that got inside of her is basically formed. So like, I'd almost feel like the mycelium is multiple people. It's not just like, because there's multiple things. Because once again, mushrooms are associated with kind of the underworld. So I'm assuming like the mycelium is maybe like tapped into the underworld, like it's pulling up underworld energy, and so it's drawing on the voices, the songs, the seeds of witches, that the work of witches that are dead. That's why like all these different voices, because she's literally got the voices of 1,000 witches, like witches that have died over the centuries and stuff like that. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know, or maybe just the mycelium itself. Like, because I'd assume it's like, it's technically connected to all dead witches. That's what I'm thinking, but maybe just the mycelium is just its own thing. But because of it, like, Rael kind of does her thing, and even to the point her eyes start glowing blue, and then all of a sudden, like, it, like, blows a hole in the wall, and then it starts cracking the foundation and cracking the other wall. I was like, holy shit. And then you look beyond the wall, and there's even more of the mycelium, and it's just like, before it broke down organic matter, now it's getting to the point it can break down inorganic matter. So later on, Sarah's taking Rael to like test this out. Like, it's like, right, you need to be in a place where you can let loose and not have to hold back, because what you can do, this whole thing could be the key to changing the tides against our enemy, you know? and it was also meant to be a demonstration as well to like another of the generals from The Hague as well as the vice president. But it's like, right, have you ever seen anything like this before? Like for Sarah, it's like there is rare work, there are rare songs and work to like, you know, but what Raelle can do is never been like, there's been nothing like it before. So it's like no pressure, and she does her thing and she blows past and destroys some stuff in a way. But then once again, it's just those mushrooms growing up in the aftermath is so interesting as such, because it happened before with her and Abigail, like at the end of season 1 / the beginning of this season. It was there, but now it's like obviously she's learning to control it more. And I'm curious, is Raelle even going to be 100% Raelle at the end of this? Like, could it be that the mycelium is just going to fully take over her? Like, why it decided to bond with Raelle? What about her is so special that, you know, why is it like it kind of chose her? Maybe there's something deeper to that. Like, maybe there's something special about... Because it seemed like Raelle was kind of special to begin with. And, you know, it feels kind of like... And it's a comparison... I think I've made this comparison before. You know, some, like, very, like, anime reference I'm about to make. But it's like Naruto. Like, she's like the Naruto in this situation. You are already special, maybe because something in her bloodline, whatever the case may be. Like, Naruto was kind of already special just because who his mom and dad were. And then on top of that, you add in the element of, like, right, you've got a tailed beast inside you, which... It's still pretty rare, but still, you also got the 9 tails, which makes you even rarer amongst the rares, and so that gives you some unlocked potential. Like, that's why I'm curious, like, is the mycelium, like, the 9 tails in this position, and is it going to try and take complete control, so, like, it needs her, that Raelle's just a pawn in, like, it trying to get free and have its own body and stuff like that. I don't know. So, there's that element to it. Once again, it's also pretty too, like the way like the mushrooms and stuff that were growing in the aftermath, like how they were like glowing, and I don't know what the exact word would be to use, but it was very beautiful, like, which I guess on some level is kind of interesting to think about. Like, right, born from such destruction comes this beauty. I guess it's supposed to almost be like a representation of life and death. You know, part of the life cycle of life, there's life and then there's death, but then, and you know, in the circle of life and everything, death gives birth to more life. I don't know what that, once again, maybe I'm thinking about it too much, but once again, maybe it just ties back to, because that's such an interesting, I latched onto that so much from last season, that whole element about mushrooms being associated with the underworld. And like they never did too much with that, except for that Scylla conversation between her and Raelle. That was the only thing they really touched on. So I've been thinking that because ever since like then like that this mycelium thing was associated with that. But now I'm like, we still don't understand the full extent of it. Like, this is a great power, but running rampant, this could be the death and end of everybody. But Raelle's getting more control over it. We're getting the more offensive capabilities of it. We've seen the defensive capabilities, so I'm curious to see what that manifests and looks like when Raelle starts tapping into that as well. But circling back to Tally, we have her looking after the vice president's door. I'm blanking on her name's Penelope, right? Trying to get her to sing her songs, but she can't because she knows the seeds, but she can't really get there because she wasn't, because for her, it's literally like the opposite of how she was trained to sing in choir, which is such an interesting thing to know of, like, oh, like how you sing in a choir. Obviously, it's a little more instinctual with the seeds and your witch. You have to kind of tap into like who you are as a witch. But also, like, she talks about the fact is, like, her dad was so proud of her, but then it was like, oh, I saw the shift in his face when he found out, like, when I started melting the glass behind me. And even Tally talks about, you know, for her, like, you know, her mom being so mad at her after, like, she took the oath and everything. It's like, well, why did you? She's like, I want to do something that was, be a part of something that was bigger than myself. And she tells Penelope, like, you won't be able to figure this out if you keep hating, like, if you hate yourself. You've got to accept yourself, you know, because she's seeing herself the way her dad did. And now it's like, no, I got to push past that. And she ultimately finds a particular seed, which, you know, ends up cracking a nearby mirror. But it's like, you know, so once again, it's so interesting that Tally out of anyone else is being that person, being that tutor, that mentor for someone else is pretty dope. Really quickly, since we are speaking on the vice president, he was like, yeah, the president came down with something. I wonder, is it easier to control the president than it would be the vice president? Maybe that's why, because he immediately, maybe he knew, like, or maybe he was like, now let me go, and you're said vice president. Like, he probably pushed that forward just because he was like, right, you're too malleable in the situation. It's like, right, you're like, I had your word you were going to go one way with it, but then you signed the order to get all these tests done. It's like, no, I can't trust you to be around Sarah because I can't trust what you might do when you're, so it's like, no, I'm going to be the one that witnesses firsthand. Once again, they're not anti-witch, but they're not as pro-witch as you would want them to be, so it's like, there's, so we'll see. But obviously Tally's at the thing, and Grigori's like, yeah, like, let's find someone worthy of the Craven name. And at the same time, she's having more visions of Sarah and her, and I'm blanking on her name. They said it again, like Tally said it again at the end of the episode, but I'm blanking on it. But the lady that's with Sarah in the visions, apparently it looked like a church, but it could have just been any building. It's like, she's like, I had no choice. It's like, they surrendered, Sarah. Like, there's blackness in your heart, and she walks away. I'm wondering if it has to deal with the Camarilla. Like, that memory is associated with what we're dealing with now. Granted, that memory seems those memories seem more recent. I mean, there's nothing that actually says that it is, but just the uniforms and everything make me think it's a lot more recent. The way she talked about it, it made it seem like the Camarilla died off like 200 years ago, not less. Adler's like, older Sarah is lying about like that. Maybe it's like it's probably stuff she doesn't like talking about because she had to do, like, that's why I'm wondering if that's supposed to be like a bloodline. Is that supposed to be like the Camarilla that she just like they surrendered, but she burned them alive, and that led to like even more hatred? Or maybe it's just something else. Like, so I'm assuming that right there is probably what divided Sarah / the army from the spree. That moment right there. Once again, I think the lady that stormed off, like, went off and formed a spree. That's still my current running theory about that, but we'll still have to wait and see. But for Tally, it's like, right, there was just so much death, and it's just, at first she was enjoying the memories, but now it's like, no. And I think it's so fascinating. I wonder, is it a byproduct of her insight or what? The reason why it seems like, why are you getting these specific memories? Like, out of any of Sarah's memories, you're getting these. Why? Maybe maybe that's something on her side of things, or maybe it's something, these are the ones that are always on Sarah's minds. Like, these are memories that are always on the forefront, so maybe that's why they're bubbling to the surface. I don't know. Other than that, circling back to Abigail, obviously she's with Adil, but she's not letting him know, like, what's up about, and he talks about tradition and stuff like that, which pisses her off, because it's like, right, tradition is why she's dealing with what she has to deal with now, because for her, it's like, tradition is the reason why your people didn't fight back and die. And he's like, the Camarilla ambushes and killed us. Yeah, but for her, it's like, right, but rather than just kind of sitting, like, she's saying, like, more so like fight back rather than just not just fighting at all. And for her, is like, she talks about Jim Bellwether, of like how she had this very powerful work that no one ever seen before, but it's kind of been locked away, and no other Bellwether has been able to do anything since. So for her, she decides to create her own work that would rival that, like something so powerful that it could end wars and kind of save so many lives. It's like, it's a combination of ambition, of wanting to separate herself, to prove herself not only to other people, but also to herself, but also do something great that she can form her own legacy from. And so we do see at the end, she's creating a storm, but it goes to the point that she starts coughing up blood, like, which obviously for a witch, her voice is her everything. So without it, like, any damage to her vocal cords and larynx and all that, like, could end up taking away her power. So her doing what she did could have been a detriment to, because also it's like, once again, you are the future of the Bellwether bloodline. Even her mom was like, don't worry, Abigail knows how important this is. She'll kind of get on board, and, she kind of rebelled against it, because she's not just about like, nah, I'm a Bellwether all the way, and that's just, I'm ready to submit to have babies pop out, just to continue. It's like, no, I want to be more than that. I want it to be more than my legacy than just being a mother, just, like hooking up with someone that I don't really care about. Because Adil's kind of outside of this. He's not even in the army. So it's not the same thing. I'm sure it wouldn't be as frowned upon as like, you know, Rael's family situation where her mom hooked up with a civvy. Like, that's a lot more frowned upon, but it's still not like accepted. Like, oh, you hook up with a deal. It's like, no, it has to be someone within the army, yada, yada, yada. They have their regulations and their traditions about that. So we'll see whether there's any prolonged damage done to Abigail, because, I mean, she was coughing up a lot. She spit out a lot of blood, dude. So probably ripped her vocal cords apart doing that. But she was summoning up something pretty powerful, but we'll see kind of how things play out from there. Another angle to this is on the Anacostia and Scylla side of things, they end up ultimately meeting Jack, because the episode is called, I believe, Tiffany. It's because the couple that they're talking to, it's like, right, our daughter, we've stopped her hanging out with her friend because they found out her friend Tiffany was actually, maybe it was her friend, or at very least like hanging out with her friends, because someone had their daughter tested and the daughter's name was Tiffany. And it's like, nobody wants a Tiffany. She's like, I'm lucky she's like, I don't know what I would do if you found out our daughter was one. It's like, the sad thing is, people who are a part of this, makes you wonder what happened if they did find out their kids were witches. Like, did they change sides? Were they so adamant about you? Like, you know what? I'm about this cause. Witches need to die and kill their children. Because obviously it's like, yeah, the spree are the one that caused damage and stuff like that. Yeah, the army's fighting them, but internationally, what about the American lives that are being sacrificed at these American, pastimes, sporting events, or the mall, like important foundations of kind of the American life and stuff like that. So, but it turns out the dude they meet, Jack, he's at least someone that runs tests and stuff like that. So now we're finding out, like, okay, because that's the thing. How are the Camarilla finding out about witches that we have never known about? Once again, the bellwethers and everything. It's like they were able to find a way to take our voices and use them, so it shouldn't be too surprising that over the centuries they found a way to track us. And so it turns out there's like a specific device, more so a particular frequency that activates, that it seems like once witches hears it, it interrupts, it reveals them, but it also undoes their work, because Scylla had changed her face, but then when she was hearing the sound, which is interesting, even though the girl was wearing headphones hearing it, it still was loud enough that a witch in the general vicinity could still pick it up. So it's basically how their voices, it's so interesting how their voices kind of work on certain seeds, certain frequencies. Their ears work the same way. So that's so interesting, because that's the whole thing they're talking about. Jack is talking with that doctor or whatever later. It's like, children can hear certain the older you get, the less frequencies you can hear. So that, because once again, that's supposed to be that certain, once again, I've always heard that. I don't know if that's true. There's a piercing certain sound that you hear and then it dies out. That's supposed to be, that means that's another frequency you can no longer hear. That's that frequency dying in your ear, because you're getting older and you can no longer hear it. That was what I've always been told. That's what I learned years ago, and I just always stuck with it. I don't know, that could be full-blown malarkey, but that's what I've always heard. But like I said, regardless. But it seems like whatever it is, like I said, it can disrupt the work, considering we've seen that their work has been stopped. Their voices have been stopped and everything in the past. And so, and it seems like they don't have to just do it during those tests. It seems like they can kind of do it whatever, because later on when Scylla crosses paths with Jack, he does it again and she reveals her face. Luckily, Acosta was there to kind of knock him out. Which that was another thing I didn't talk about. The fact is that Rael is now able to speak mother tongue, even though she had a hard time doing it before. It's just, once again, I don't think it's just her. Once again, I think it's 1,000 witches are with her now, whether she really realizes it or not. But so they've got Jack captured, and it's like, right, we're in this together, so the enemy of my enemy is my friend type of thing. So they've got Jack captured, so it's going to be an interrogation, I'm sure, but he's probably not going. He's so adamant about the cause, he's probably not going to give up any information. We'll have to wait and see how that turns out, but sets up a lot of interesting things to know. Now they have an idea of how they're tracking down witches, and most likely they're doing this probably nationwide, but probably, because we don't know if this is just in the States. This could be a worldwide thing. I don't know if they've talked about whether or not the international world has been hit by this or not. I think they've only talked about it really in the context of the States. Maybe they have talked about it internationally, but I'm not remembering. But regardless, all of this sets up some pretty interesting stuff. I'm really curious to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. So next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.